Welcome to the Actor's Career Compass, where we help aspiring screen actors find high-quality auditions, sign with great agents, and book major roles in legit productions. I'm your host, Martin Benson, and today I interview Rahti Gorfien, who talks in depth about the mental side of living a creative career like acting. We discuss how to stay organized in your career while still being fully creative, how to stay confident in the face of challenges, and even some tips to break through mental roadblocks that you'll probably face as you move forward. Let's dive right in. Hey everybody, today I have Rahti Gorfien. She is a seasoned coach for creatives, and she helps artists tackle challenges like organization, managing personal lives, and neurodivergence. Drawing from her acting career and personal experience with ADHD, she equips clients with tools to focus, gain visibility, and monetize their passions. In her book, The 5 Emotions That Stop Success, Rahti shares strategies for overcoming obstacles that hinder creative success. So, Rahti, thank you for joining me today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey growing your own career?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I was listening to another episode of yours, and you asked someone when they knew they wanted to be an actor. And I had a lot of moments like that. One in particular was I was probably sixth or seventh grade playing one of the children in The King and I, sitting amongst the chorus in a high school production. And the lights were on me. And I mean, I guess I knew I wanted to be an actor. As I said, there were moments before that, but it's that time you're heading into high school, deciding what you're going to really do when you grow up. And between the lights being on me and people watching the stage and giving everyone but me all this attention is how it felt. And my not having to do anything but just be. I thought to myself, I'm home. This is it. This is what I want to do. Fast forward, this all is cumulative. Life is cumulative, and it leads to my coaching journey. Fast forward a few years, and I created a position for myself as the first company apprentice of the Yale Summer Cabaret Theater. This was circa probably 73 of the last century, 1973, 74. And one of the people in that 8-person company was Meryl Streep and Christine Estabrook and many other actors who had wonderful careers. Marcel Rosenblatt, who you may have never heard of, but whom I heard Meryl talk about on Charlie Rose as being an influence. Anyway, I would get little bit parts thrown at me. That was, in exchange for cutting up cheesecake that was imported from Junior's in New York and cleaning the urinals. I would wash my hands between those activities. Basically, in exchange for the grunt work, I got tossed a bit part once in a while. And one of the artistic directors was a very approachable guy, and I was not shy about being in his face about any possible opportunity to get on stage. And
Nice.
I think I called him very inappropriately late one night. He was in bed with his wife. And later his wife told me that he had turned to her and said, "She's pushy." And then she told me he had said, "Pushy is good," which I took to heart, maybe even more than I should have. I don't know. One of the roles I got was as the corpse under the couch in the Real Inspector Hound. I don't know if you know The Real Inspector Hound by Tom Stoppard. It's a murder mystery comedy, and there is a corpse under the couch for the entire show. And so I got that part, and I had big army boots on. And I believe Meryl Streep was the lead, and she was in this long gold lame dress passing back and forth over my legs. And I was the best corpse. I did not breathe for whatever it was. We usually, because it's a summer cabaret theater, they would shorten the plays. So it was maybe 45 minutes or an hour. Didn't breathe. I didn't move. I was fully committed. And my parents came to see a show once, came to see one of those performances. And I ran up to my father afterwards, as every little girl does. She wants her father to think she's amazing. And I asked him, well, what did you think? And he said, indicating Meryl Streep, that big blonde's going to make it. Now, of course, what I needed to hear was, you were the best corpse. I can't believe how great you are and how wonderful it is you get to work with and watch these amazing actors. He didn't know no better, my generation, they didn't have any education around child rearing. They didn't know how to handle their own complex. But moments like that, I think your audience knows are pivotal. And I made a decision in that moment that if I was going to be a successful actor, I better be as good or better than Meryl Streep. I had no idea how high that bar had been set. Nobody knew her yet. Fast forward, when I could have gotten into Yale Drama School, I did an audition, and I, at the time, perversely thought this was a mature decision because I didn't think I could handle the rejection. Instead, I went to what is now the Tisch graduate acting program in New York, NYU Tisch. And at the time, it was a conservatory. So we were all mixed together, undergrads, grads, but it was all the same training. And I was way too young for it, really. And it was quite brutal. And I suppose some of us could get together and start a class action suit over some of the things that went down. They would not fly today. But fast forward, Meryl Streep was rising, and I was floundering. I had no tools to deal with the business. And the more successful she got, the more I felt like a couch. I felt like the corpse under the couch
That's
in
so
my own career in life.
it's like a metaphor.
Yeah. And I had a breakdown at one point because I decided, well, maybe I will. Maybe I should have auditioned after going to Tisch School of the Arts. I auditioned many years later. Robert Brustein was no longer the chair of the drama department. Nobody knew me. I didn't get in. And I just took to my bed. And a friend of mine was worried, and she brought me to a yoga retreat. And I fell in love with the guru type person and lived in an ashram for 2.5 years, which is where I got the name Rahti, which has a lot of meanings. One of which is desire, which I think is ultimately a good name for a coach. That was a pivotal experience too, because I ended up moving in out of a need to figure out who I was. I was so identified with being an actor that I had no sense of myself as a person, as a human being. I had no tools. I couldn't make a living. And I gained a lot out of being there. I also like to say I'm probably one of the few people ever to get kicked out of a cult, because I called the guru out on a few things.
Wow.
Like that. And ultimately, years later, there was a big scandal and he was ousted and all this stuff. But anyway, I digress. I came back to New York with all of this wisdom, and the core piece was company is stronger than will. We don't do anything worthwhile alone. So I was starting to build groups around me using structures I got out of books like The Artist Way by Julia Cameron and Wishcraft by Barbara Sher, who I consider the godmother of coaching. We don't hear about her much because coaching was really established through Landmark, and ultimately Thomas Leonard founded the International Coach Federation, I believe. But she was a major influence, I believe, in the coaching profession and culture. I became a stand-up comic ultimately because in the 80s, late 80s, if you sang like Barbara Streisand, you could break in through theater on the stage. But if you couldn't, and I could sing courageously, I was an actor who sang courageously, I'd like to say, I was better at being funny. So you went into stand-up. And that's, of course, I was peers with Ray Romano and Jim Gaffigan. I was in acting classes with Jim, and they were getting scooped up. I had a wonderful acting teacher named Joanna Beckson who taught Meisner, and she just pulled everything together for me. And ultimately, I married a stand-up comic because we were working the road together. We were like the king and queen of Pennsylvania. And he was watching me lead all these groups, and people were getting stuff done. A good friend of mine was a school teacher, and she opened a bookstore on Lexington Avenue. That was her dream. Another friend moved to Maine and became a DJ. And my husband said, you're good at this. You should start charging. I mean, we were both artists. I didn't marry up. I mean, there's nobody with a corporate job. We're both trying to make it. I'm restaurant hostessing. I became I became a cook to jazz musicians. I didn't even know I was a successful entrepreneur the first time I was. I cooked for David Sanborn and Don Grolnick at one point, and Will Lee of David Letterman's band, and Paul Schaefer once said, "Oh, I ate this purple thing you cooked. It was happening." And I think it must have been like red cabbage that bled or something. I don't know. I had learned macrobiotic cooking, and that's how I got into the whole cooking in for musicians thing. You hit your vein of gold, and it was jazz musicians. They started recommending me to each other. And yeah, it was so weird, but it was painful because I didn't want to be a cook. I want to be an actor.
Yeah.
And then when I started doing these groups, I realized my husband always shone a light on, that's what a partner does. They're your witness. They shine a light on your strengths as well as your weaknesses. I thought, well, what the heck am I doing that I can charge for? And I figured out eventually it was coaching. Fast forward. I got certified through the ICF. I ended up becoming trained as an ADHD coach because my husband has ADHD and so does my son. And while I started out self-training and coaching artists and freelance moms, you kind of coach yourself at first, I believe. I guess I still coach myself. That brain wiring, the creative brain wiring, the divergent thinking is very much like neurodivergent brain wiring in ADHD. And I didn't even know those were my people. I was afraid of it. I thought, I can't handle that. That's herding cats. I don't want to coach anyone with ADD. Turned out to be the perfect niche. So now at cocktail parties, I get to say, I coach creatives who feel pulled in 50 directions by helping them focus so they can grab the focus of others, get seen, and make money doing what they love. So that's the journey I was on. And I will say I did get seen and I did start creating my own work. I had no tools for navigating the business. Absolutely none. My life was my training for that. And I could tell you stories that go on and on. I should, I was a personal assistant to an actress And she was a journeyman actress. You've never heard of her, but she worked all the time. And she used to say, I want to patent an apron that says, "Don't do what I did." If I had known someone like me when I came out of acting school, I probably would have avoided a world of pain and done a heck of a lot better. And a lot of that is in the book that I wrote, a lot of that journey.
Nice. That's a very, very crazy story. It's basically like you're coaching, yeah, as you said, you're sort of coaching your previous self in a
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Which leads me into this next question, which is a little bit more about your coaching work here. So you do a lot of this work, coaching. Can you tell us not how you got into it, because obviously we know that you already talked about
Oh, you
that,
know all that.
but if, I mean, you can talk about it a little bit more, but how important is this for people? I think that people need to understand a little bit, like, you can feel pulled in a lot of different directions, but some people might be like, oh, I can just, all I need to do is focus. It's not that complicated. But then like 5 years later, they look back and they're like, uh, I need to focus. It's not that complicated. It's kind of like you get into this cycle. And so how do people understand the importance of what you do, and B, like, what could they even do to kind of like, can you even work through this on your own, or is it best to talk about things like this, work with a coach?
Oh, I couldn't have done it on my own. I mean, I've worked with lots of coaches, and I also went through 15 years of psychoanalysis, and it was really the confluence of all that work I did on myself, starting with living in the ashram. Actually, I started doing TM meditation when I was 16. That allowed me to create my own methodology. This is over the course of a lifetime. And the problem with being able to focus is our focus is constantly hijacked. And if you're not clear about your own values and what matters to you, and it's very hard to get clear about that in a vacuum, in isolation, then your focus is going to get my focus was hijacked by trying to be Reese Witherspoon when I mean, I got to tell you, I went to an audition once. My theater mother, Anna, who I was the personal assistant to, she knew my brother-in-law was an art director, and he got me a a Procter and Gamble commercial audition. And she said, well, you got to tone down the ethnic look. She loaned me a wig. She loaned me this red auburn straight-haired wig, and I put on a plaid shirt. And I went to that commercial audition, and I was listening to all of the other actors go in, and I could hear them getting 2, 3 chances to do it with adjustments, right? I go in there, I do it once, and they say thank you. Later on, my brother-in-law says to me, "Are you nuts? What were you thinking? You look like a Hasidic woman up there." Now, for your audience who doesn't know, Hasidism, the Hasidics are a very, very religious sect in the Jewish faith. The women shave their heads and wear wigs. I wasn't fooling anybody. My focus was hijacked and by these mythologies in the business at the time, that this is what will sell. Once that's the thing I had to learn. I mean, I talked to a daytime soap. Mary Lynn Henry was the name of the woman. She's probably retired by now, but she told me, "You should tweeze your eyebrows, and I just see you doing a lot of loft theater," which I found crushing. However, if what I've learned now, because this is what I do with my clients, a lot of it is about learning to reframe criticism and information. I found that crushing, but what I should have done is taken it as marketing advice. Loft theater, you mean like Willem Dafoe and Cherry Jones? You mean go down that route? Really lean in to who I am? To who I am theatrically? I couldn't take criticism, and it wasn't, and to be fair, it was not conveyed as criticism. I mean, it was not conveyed as marketing advice. It was conveyed as, who the F do you think you are? Get, I mean, unfortunately, you get older, you forget names, but there's a very famous actress who I believe has dwarfism. Do you know who I mean? She starred in the year of Living Dangerously. She played I believe a Chinese spy or something, a male character. It's way back in the day.
Linda Hunt.
Yes, Linda Hunt. I remember her telling the story of going into an agent's office and being told, "Get the hell out." Now, she obviously had a lot more spiritual and emotional psychological grounding than I did. I didn't realize that I had a bipolar disorder. So when I work with people, getting back to your original question, I listen very carefully to what they believe, to what lies they have bought into, because what you pay attention to grows. I am not the first to say that. It's the law of attraction in a nutshell. But if you believe there is something wrong with you and you have to change yourself, you're going to get more and more of that. If you believe I am a unique individual with a contribution no one else can make, and I need to get really clear about what that is. And I know the work you do. And I think there's another coach, the only other coach I know who works with actors like this is Brian O'Neill, who I'm sure, acting as a business is, we didn't have that kind of training back then, was get really clear about how you are perceived and really live into that. That would have been such a relief. But I need to hear people where they're at. And as soon as I hear someone being down on themselves, it's usually because they focused on some misinformation that needs to be reframed. And also, a lot of the time, you talked about helping people in their various lives. First thing I do when I work with someone is they do a life wheel. You've probably seen those with the different pie sections, where you have your relationships, your family, your career, your finances, your environment. And I see where they are in all of those areas, because your career is part of your life, not the other way around. And if something is out of balance in your life, it's going to impact your career in some way. And if you're putting too much pressure on your career to feel good, well, again, you are effed. I'm being a very nice, polite old lady. I usually swear like a sailor, but I don't know what the parameters are. And I noticed that your podcast is rated G, so I'm being careful. However, this, of course, brings me to another story, which is there was an old agent named Barna Ostertag back in the day. And there was a blackout in New York. And a thing like a blackout wasn't going to stop me. Because again, I had that doggedness, which if it had been properly channeled, probably would have resulted in a rather robust career. But, I was just nuts. So I showed up at that building. 14 flights I walked to get to her office. Now, somehow the old lady was up there herself, but I think it's because she was there before the electricity went down. And she said to me, "I'm talking to you because you walked those 14 flights. I want you to know otherwise, I think you're crazy." And she went on and on to talk about how what actors don't understand is what's interesting about them is not that they're actors. To be a really good actor, you have to have a life. And I never forgot that. You have to have a full life. And if you start putting too much pressure on your career to pay your rent, that's not good. Back in the day, actors had trades. They didn't necessarily expect to be making a living at their acting right away. I'm not saying you can't, but you want to take the pressure off your career. And so from to my mind, working with someone like me in conjunction with someone who works on the marketing, which is a totally different skill set than acting, and managing your internal life is essential. There's a lot to, you really have to get grounded in yourself, which is why I always have people meditate. I have people learn meditation.
There's so much that you talked about that I found it makes a ton of sense. I mean, just the idea of having a life outside of acting, and it reminded me of something that a business coach talks about. And it's like if you're trying to write copy for a business and you have no life outside of the business, well, your copy is going to be really boring because no one, and it's the same thing with acting. You not just to support yourself, but as you're saying, you need to have that life outside of acting to make your acting so much more dimensional. And it also helps you, obviously, when it comes to being more grounded and centered and less stressed and worried in your performance. The stress from not having, let's say, the money that you
Mm-hmm.
want or need is going to essentially make you then feel all like, I have to book this. And then it's going to come out in your performance and make
That's
things
gonna.
worse. So, and then you also talked a little bit about the what I like to call shiny object syndrome, right?
Mhm.
And that is so important. And so as as we kind of get ready to move on to the next question, I think the big takeaway here is that there's so many things that can come up that you don't even think about. Like you could know all the steps. You could have a book right in front of you that tells you exactly what to do, but there's so many other things that come up that are always gonna get in your way, and there's always going to be something that's like, you look at it as an excuse almost. And having someone who can kind of see that from the outside, if you're blind to it, which we often are. I teach something called career blind spots. It's like there's these
Oh, really?
opportunities that are right there, but you're not seeing them. My own very brief story is this one publicist at one point. I was working with her, and she was helping me. This was years ago, helping me to get some articles out there and promote. And so she's like, well, do you have any connections? I'm like, I don't know, because I was stuck and I wasn't doing anything. She's like, any connections at all? Like anybody, and I was like, well, I guess I know this one guy from Actors Connection. And she's like, oh, okay. Well, why don't you send an email over and ask if they're open to you writing any articles for them or, promoting. And so I was like, duh, why didn't I think of that? Like it was so obvious, but because I was so in the middle of things and in the thick of it, I didn't see that obvious opportunity that's right there. And that was kind of a career blind spot to me. I was just busy chasing shiny objects and all over the place. So,
Absolutely. And notice that someone else had to point out your blind spot.
yeah.
And I think people are hard on themselves for not being able to see their own. How can you? It's like when you have mustard on your cheek and you're reading. Somebody's got to tell you to wipe it off.
Yeah, it's like a coach in a basketball game. They're seeing the whole game and you're just seeing the area that you're in. So it makes a lot of sense. Now, let's move into a couple of tactical things. So creatives do sometimes have trouble, obviously managing all these different parts of their lives. So what are some set steps that you might suggest to help them so that they can actually stay on track more, but at the same time not block too much creativity because there's kind of that worry of, oh, if I'm too singular focused, then I'm not going to be letting things be creative as much, right? So what's your thoughts around that and what strategies
Sure.
do people employ?
Well, when I work with people, I really do a lot of work on helping people figure out how to plan. I had a coach who said planning is the highest form of self-care. It's true because when you plan, you create a scaffolding to live into and be in the moment with. Whereas if you're waking up every morning going, oh, I don't know what to do. What should I do first? I don't know. that's a lot of energy you're wasting. So that's one thing. We figure out what an ideal scaffolding would look like for an individual. And we go from gross to granular. Where do you want to be in a year? Where do you want to be in 6 months? I reverse engineer with people so that people, week to week, month to month, know what their priorities are. And that includes everything. That includes cultivating interests and hobbies and the person they are. Because it's, you can say, oh, I better be an interesting person. But if you're saying it in the service of being an actor, you still miss the point. I can't stand it when I hear actors who, broken through say stuff like, well, if I couldn't act, I don't know what I would have done. I said, you would have friggin' figured it out. You would have survived. And it sends the wrong message. You gotta love your life, whether you're getting booked or not. So I have what I call the workday sandwich. And that, again, I can't take credit for as another coach. I actually created something for people with ADHD I call the workday salad. That works a lot better. But the sandwich metaphor is the morning slice of bread is your God or goddess time. That's where you're getting centered, you're self-nurturing. And that can look different for everyone. It may be going to the gym, it may be going for a walk, it may be having coffee out in the sun on the stoop with your partner. You have your morning slice of bread. Then the sandwich filling is the work you're doing, and you have that planned out at least the night before. You know your appointments. You know your auditions. It's not easy to do that because this is one of those professions that does a lot of hurry up and wait. So whatever structure you have has to have flexibility in it. However, there are certain things you can control within the meat of the sandwich, rehearsal, acting class,
I do have to say, I think that actors do have to give themselves a pat on their back because, as we all know, acting is not something like a regular job where there's someone there to be like, you have to do this and this is the next step, etc. You're kind of making this up as you go, and you have to be in control of it. So, everyone, just the fact that you are an actor listening to this and you're pursuing something is difficult already, in my opinion, means that you're kind of like doing something that's way more difficult.
you have no idea how courageous you are. And it's kind of like anything. If you knew how hard it was, you might not do it. So it's, you don't know. But also for actors, I recommend then the workday salad because, well, the top slice of bread is when your day ends and you do have to decide your day is over and you do something pleasurable then. Workday salad is a little different. You have the basic lettuce, which is your career, right? I'm forgetting exactly how I actually did this, right? No, actually, I think the lettuce is basically the scaffolding of your life. It's your self-nurturing, it's your health. And then the protein are the things you're doing to further your career. And then, those can happen anytime during the day, whenever you can have them happen, because you could get called for a go-see all of a sudden in the middle of your day. So maybe you'll have to meditate later in the evening, right? And the croutons are very important. The croutons and the dressing is very important because that's fun. You have to have some fun. The hobbies are what make you interesting. I mean, don't do a hobby to be interesting, but they make you interesting, right? I mean, I have a hobby where often when I'm coaching, I take the wax from baby Bonbell cheese and I
Okay.
sculpt it into little creatures. That's a favorite hobby of mine. During COVID, I made a whole wall of COVID cats going up the a border in my kitchen.
That's awesome. I love that.
So you better have croutons and delicious dressing, but you got to know what all the parts of the salad are. So when your sandwich gets thrown up in the air, it doesn't just become garbage.
I think that's really interesting. I see bits of myself. I think I'm kind of a mixture, a little bit of the two. I mean,
Hmm.
usually most
Hmm.
mornings I start with working out, then during the day I'm working, but during my work day I kind of take some breaks here and there and watch some stuff and just kind of whatever. And then
Yep.
at night I'm usually much more laid back and spending more time doing family related stuff.
Hmm.
So it is definitely good. I think that as long as people are very, as you've said over and over again, singular focused, especially with the sandwich or the salad metaphor, right? If they're singular focused, because sometimes if you're just like, oh, I have to do like a zillion different things, I guess I'll do this thing randomly today. But if they know what they want and they're like, this is the primary thing that I'm working on, and as you said, the day before, they're kind of at least pretty sure of what they want to accomplish the next day, then they can make sure that that protein in the salad gets done, even if it's out of order.
That's right. That is right. And be so kind to yourself and so gentle. I love that from Ted Lasso. Be a goldfish, right? Do you remember that metaphor from the show Ted Lasso? Well, he says to when the players mess up, he tells them to be a goldfish because the goldfish allegedly has the shortest memory of any creature on the planet.
Nice.
Keep going. Don't beat yourself up.
I've definitely dealt with down times in my life, and I don't frequently talk about it because it's obviously stressful to think about things. But there's been times, I mean, even during COVID, and my business had to be completely shut down, and then a year or two ago, when AI started to become really well known, and as someone running a headshot company, there's the potential now there's these AI headshot generators, which, by the way, we generally don't
Oh my
recommend
God.
actors use, not because we as headshot photographers want to make money, but because there's generally a negative sentiment toward AI in the industry. And if it ever got found out that you're using AI for your headshots, it could cause you problems with casting directors, and people might remember that. So, regardless, though, to get back on point,
Yeah, I thought of you the other day because something popped up, an AI headshot generator.
oh, interesting. Yeah. But I've, as I was saying, I kind of have been dealing with stressful times myself. I mean, we had to, my team and I, when the whole AI thing was coming out, we had to still prepare and be like, well, what happens if in the next year or two, nobody wants a headshot anymore? Thankfully, that's not happening. And people, for the most part, and we've actually had clients come in being like, yeah, I did an AI photo, but it didn't look like me. It was creepy and I want a real photo. It was something though. And when you deal with these really stressful things, you can't start being like, oh, I'm a failure. As you're saying, you don't want to beat yourself up. You could feel down for a little bit. But then it's kind of like, all right, well, what's the next step and what is possible? What do I actually want? As you're saying, the law of attraction, right? You don't want to focus on the negative. Instead, focus on where can I go and what are the actual steps to get me there, and then just implement, implement, implement. Eat the eat the protein in your
That's right.
salad, at
That's right.
least some every day. Don't
Yep.
skip days, and don't also overwhelm yourself by only eating protein because then you're going to feel sick.
Yeah, you said something very important, I think, which has to do with what is currently called spiritual bypassing. You're going to feel bad. And as an acting teacher of mine said many years ago, if you feel bad, feel bad. Feel real bad, feel bad. But don't feel bad for feeling bad. We kick ourselves when we're down. The only way through something is through it. And that's also why you don't want to be isolated. You want to have community, you want to have support. You want to have people in your life that you can call up and bitch and moan to. Because you're right, Martin. You have no idea. You have no idea what a challenging profession you have chosen, right? So, and paradoxically, that means you have to be so gentle with yourself.
We've been talking about a lot of things. I would just like to ask you, is there any other advice that you'd like to share or anything that we kind of haven't talked about that you're like, actors listening to this really need to know this, or this can definitely be helpful to them?
Okay. There's an actor I'm friends with. He actually sang at my wedding. And I'm dropping names like crazy. Chuck Cooper, Broadway actor. You've seen him on Law and Order all the time too. But I remember many, many years ago, I was hanging out in his apartment, and he's got kids. He has a life. He had a life before he was like you knew about him. And I remember I was helping out with the kids, and he came home from a commercial audition, and he went out on, he lives well, I don't want to say where he lives, but he went out on a patio and he started playing the guitar. And I asked him, so how'd it go? How'd it go? To me, I was in such awe of his success. And he said to me, I did my tricks. He did his tricks. In other words, he didn't psychoanalyze what happened in the audition. He didn't worry about whether they liked him or not, whether he got it or not. I have no idea if he got that commercial. He probably didn't. But he just left it out on the field. I did my tricks. That's my advice. You let it go. It's just like with creating a character. You don't try to repeat what you did in your last performance. You stay relaxed, you let it go. Keep letting it go.
I think that that's super important because it is absolutely impossible to control things. Like
Absolutely.
you can only control some things, and as soon as you bring another person into the equation, it's impossible to have total control. So,
And control doing your tricks. You can give yourself little objectives in an audition, right? You probably talk about this. All right. You can go in and say, I am going to breathe. I'm going to breathe and really breathe through this audition. Whatever. You pick a little goal for yourself that's totally within your control. And you do your tricks. That's it.
nice. Well, this was an amazing interview. I really appreciate your time. And it is my understanding that you actually are currently offering a free sample coaching session for people who are interested and considering working with you. So, do you mind telling us a little bit more about that, what that looks like, and how people can get in touch if they're interested? And by the way, we will be including also a link if you click the link in the podcast write up. So, go ahead, though.
I do a free session because I can't work with everybody. The fact is, not everybody's a fit. I'm not unique in giving a free sample session. I mean, I think most coaches are going to do that because I want to see if you're coachable, and you want to see if you feel coached. You should walk away from a free sample session feeling like you got value from it, whether you hire the coach or not.
Hmm.
So I can guarantee you will walk away with some sort of shift or tool if you schedule a time with me.
Excellent. Well, that's awesome. I mean, I really, really appreciate how much you've shared today. It was a very fun conversation, kind of went in a number of different directions, but that's the nature of it when you're dealing with our own mind and internal dealing with all the facets of life. Things can go in different directions, and we kind of covered a range of topics and how people can begin to take control. So hopefully some of these steps that we talked about here, you can try them out for yourself, but I would personally recommend that you go a step further and begin by taking action and signing up for that free session while it's available. Again, you may offer it all the time or you may not. I can't guarantee anything because this is a podcast that we've recorded. So
Yeah,
that's
and
one of
I don't play, I don't like, I wish I was better marketing. I don't play the FOMO games and pretend that it's a limited.
yeah, well, my point here is if someone comes
Yeah,
back and listens to this podcast 20 years from now, you
I'll
never know if
still,
you're
well,
doing.
by then I'll be retired, so don't wait that long.
All right. Well, I definitely appreciate your time. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a ball.
Well, thanks for listening. Now, if you want to dive even deeper on mindsets and traits needed to grow your acting career, I highly recommend checking out my podcast called 3 Traits You Must Develop to Book Major SAG-AFTRA Acting Roles and Auditions, which is episode number 85. In it, I talk about a simple breakdown of how to organize all the different essential aspects of growing your acting career if you want success. Check it out again. It's episode number 85. It's called 3 Traits You Must Develop to Book Major SAG-AFTRA Acting Roles and Auditions on the Actor's Career Compass. Lastly, if you'd like to get some personalized advice, let's hop on a quick Zoom call. It's absolutely free. I'll take a look at where you are, what you're struggling with right now, and I'll help you figure out the next best steps that you can take. And we'll see if one of my one-to-one coaching programs might be a good fit for you. Whenever you're ready, just visit martinbenson.com to set it up. I'd love to meet with you. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.